If you're in business and you've not yet taken the time to understand how generative AI is going to change your industry, I don't care what you do, there is not an industry that will not be dramatically impacted by generative AI. If you want to survive the next decade in business, 5 years from now, you better take the time right now to understand what it can do for you and what it can do against you. Harness what it can do for you, prepare for what it can do against you.
Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. It's time to hear the world's movers, shakers, and difference makers spill their secrets for unlimited success. So strap in, for Badass Entrepreneurs Only begins now. Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. I am Coach Dan Gordon, and I am thrilled to have on the show Tal Zlotnitsky, a badass entrepreneur and managing partner of Ignite IT Consulting, where he takes IT companies on the ultimate badass journey of growth and success. Tal is the host of the podcast Braving Business, which ranks in the top 0.5% of global podcast popularity. Talk about badass. He is also co-founder of ParkMobile, an app that allows you to find and pay for parking on your phone. Tal was born a low-income, undocumented immigrant and has risen to the heights of being one of Obama's presidential partners and has even spoke at the White House on behalf of the president in 2012. Tal is motivated by continuous self-improvement in both his personal and professional life, and we're so lucky to have him here. Tal Zlotnitsky, welcome, welcome, welcome to For Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
Well, after an introduction like that, wow, thank you so much. I feel very mellow, but where's my Red Bull? I mean, I need to get fired up.
Oh, we're going to get into it. In fact, would it be okay? We just sort of dive in the middle of the interview.
Let's do it.
So I had the supreme honor of being on Braving Business, and it's such an amazing podcast. The questions that you ask, the places that you go, and that's why I wanted you to be on For Badass Entrepreneurs Only. You talked briefly about surviving adversity. So let's get right into that. I want to know about your failures, what happened, and how you came back. Go.
Okay. How much time do you have?
As much as you need.
I gotcha. Well, you know what? I talk about it in the very first episode of the Braving Business podcast is actually an interview of me by my co-host, PJ Benoit. We ended season one with me interviewing him. We both had really interesting careers and lives. My very first startup ended with me literally blowing up. I mean, physically blowing up and needed to be helicoptered to the hospital, having had a power washer blow up in my face. I didn't think I'd get into business again. I survived. Thank God for Retin A. I didn't even have severe burns, or at least they healed. And I thought I'd never get into business again, to be honest with you. I thought I'm just not cut out for this. This is too hard. Everyone seemingly let me down. The people I hired, I ran a franchise of college pro painters. The people that brought me on, it just felt like business is not for me. But there was a bug. I mean, there was something in me that gnawed at me to just keep going at it. And I started another company with my brothers a few years later, when I was 21 years old, and that company ended up being $100 million plus company, which we sold in 2009, and we started several other companies around that. So while it sounds like an incredible, oh, okay, you had one failure and the rest was just up, up, up. The reality is anyone who's been in business and anyone that's run any business of any size knows it is constantly a battle. You're constantly having setbacks. There are days where you can barely get yourself out of bed because you feel beat down by something. Maybe you lost a client. Maybe you made a fool out of yourself. Maybe an employee that you really thought the world of let you down, or perhaps chose to leave the business. There were so many setbacks, so many days where I wasn't sure that it was worth it. But on the whole, I actually believe it is the setbacks that have made the journey worthwhile.
Yeah, and it's so easy to say that from this perspective, right? It's like, when Han Solo and Luke and Princess Leia get out of the Death Star and they're like, oh, wow, that was amazing. But when they're in the Death Star, they don't know they're going to get away, right? Like we know sitting in the audience, like, oh, well, they're going to get away. But when you're having that experience, when you don't want to get out of bed, what got you out of bed?
It's a good question. And by the way, I don't know that we can guarantee to anyone that the story ends well.
Yeah.
I often speak about Ted Lasso, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, and not just because I'm a huge soccer fan and I'm a big humor fan, but I actually think it's one of the best leadership shows you'll ever watch. And if you've not watched,
Yes.
I strongly encourage you to. There's a great episode where Ted talks to his team after they get relegated to the second division
Yeah.
about the fact that there's always in the movie that part in the middle where the heroes of the movie are in the middle of a dark forest, and the movie doesn't end there because it wouldn't, right? I
Right.
guess horror movies could, but most romantic movies, he was talking about rom-coms, they don't end there. You know that there is a happy ending. Now, interestingly, I don't know that I can guarantee an entrepreneur a happy ending, but what I can guarantee you is if you act in a way that you consider consistent with your values and you don't sacrifice your values, you act in a way that represents the best version of yourself, then no
Hmm.
matter what the outcome is, you're going to feel proud of the journey and you're going to feel that you learned something and pick something up. I didn't quite finish my setbacks because probably the biggest setback of my career happened at the absolute top of my career. I was
Hmm.
running the biggest company I'd ever founded. I controlled data. We were backed by Goldman Sachs. We were on the verge of announcing a major acquisition, and we lost a lawsuit that eventually cost me and my shareholders tens of millions of dollars. And I stayed with the business for another year, and then I left. And I could tell you, if to the question that started this,
Yeah.
my long-winded answer, I apologize, which is how do you get out of bed? In my case, I got out of bed because my dog made me get out of bed because he had to go potty.
So what
But
I hear you saying is get a dog.
I would say get a dog, or frankly, just have something other than yourself
Mm.
to have to think about. Obviously, I have my incredible children; they're all adults now. But what I was thinking of at the time is they need to see that I am, despite the fact that I'm going through such turmoil internally and that I'm struggling so much, they need to see that I'm not giving up,
Mm.
that things will be okay. It was really important for me for my children to not feel that all was lost. And you know what? I faked it till I made it. I mean, it was really a very dark period deep inside my soul.
Yeah.
I was searching and I was lost and I didn't feel that I deserved what I had gotten, which is a very common thing. But
Hmm.
once the self-pity burned itself out, I
Yeah.
was able to see the tremendous positive impact on my life of that moment, how much it set me back to a course that was closer to my core, which is about returning value, which is about paying it forward and being more true to myself. I think I'd gone away from that. The bigger the business got, the more zeros were attached to it, the harder it was to be true to my values. And now I know that maybe I was set back so that I could return to where I want to be, and where on my deathbed, if I look back in my life, I may look back at the period after that setback as my moments of greatest glory.
Wow. And that's there's so much I want to talk about here, Tal. When you talk about being true to yourself, it's an easy throwaway line. I don't mean to diminish it, but it's an easy thing to say, on a refrigerator magnet. Be true to yourself. It seems to me that you had a recognition that you weren't being true to yourself, and that maybe that's what drove you into that end. So, what, how were you being? And then how did you become when you became true to yourself?
So Dan, there's a really simple and plain anecdote that I can share with you that
Yeah.
will illustrate just how untrue I was to myself. I didn't even go by my own name. I'm not saying I faked it. I wasn't but I did go by TJ for about 25 years. And it was because a baseball coach, I played at the University of Maryland briefly, and the coach there couldn't say my name. And I told him, he asked me my middle name. Don't really have one, but I said Jacob. It's my grandfather's name, not my son's
Hmm.
name. And he
Hmm.
said, "All right, you're TJ." And for the next 25 years, I let myself be defined by a guy that frankly hated me and never played me. And it carried on. I became a persona. I became a certain version of myself. I'm not going to say I was entirely untrue to myself, but I'm going to say I
Hmm.
wasn't the best version of myself and I wasn't my most centered version. And frankly, I don't even know that I knew who that was. And so,
Hmm.
the first step to being true to yourself is actually doing the work to get to know yourself. And that work is really painful. It takes time. It's not fun. And oftentimes it comes with tremendous personal angst. But at the end of that search, you come to terms with yourself. You begin to appreciate that whatever shaped you, good and bad, isn't something that you entirely own. You take responsibility for the things you could have done better, and there are always those things. You recognize there were certain things, particularly when you were a child, that were outside of your control, but that shaped you tremendously, that had an incredible impact on you. You recognize those things. You try to let go of the anger associated with them and just accept whatever lessons there were to be learned. And then
Mm-hmm.
you move forward with grace. And that's what I mean by being true to yourself.
Yeah. And so what did you discover then? Like, okay, you recognize I'm not being true to myself. Now I'm approaching being true. Now I'm approaching being true to myself. What is that? What is that? Oh, yes, this is true.
It's a great question, and I wish I had a linear answer or a very simple answer. I would say that I'm still discovering it day by day, but I know that at my core, I'm someone that deeply values other humans, and that I don't believe that someone has to be the best at something to warrant my attention or my respect. And I start
Hmm.
there. That is my that is my bottom, that is my baseline for my life, is that no matter who I run into, I will treat them with respect. Now, if the respect is not reciprocated, which sometimes it isn't,
Yeah.
I'm not going to continue to engage, but I will also not disparage. I will not go
Right.
down, I will not follow a person down a dark alley or down a
Yeah.
dark road. I will recognize, and this is something I used to do. I used to be someone that, and many people are like that. Someone gets you, and now you're enemies, or now you're looking to
Yeah.
get them. And it's just true in the workplace. I mean, whether if you're an entrepreneur, it may not be people that work for you, but it may be people that are your competitors. And it becomes
Hmm.
this really nasty dance where you badmouth them and they badmouth you. That life, I never want to live that again. I
It's a
bend
trap, isn't
over
it?
backward. It is. It's an absolute trap. Frankly, it's an absolute loss too. I mean, even if you gain some business, and from
Yeah.
time to time you will, it comes at an expense to your soul that's simply not worth it. It
Right.
makes you a darker version of yourself. It makes you a version of yourself that is less in touch with your core, less in touch with your values, less in touch with the things that are most important to you. And I've come to recognize that there's simply nothing important enough to warrant me moving off my center.
It's so simple to say, right? I'm not going to move off my center. I'm going to hold to my values, my being true to myself. And when you make that declaration, don't you find it gets tested?
Of course it does. It gets tested
Yeah.
all the time. And if you're not, someone taught me something about meditation that really changed my perspective on meditation. And I'm glad to share that with your audience. And I hope it has an impact on at least some of them. And I think it
Yeah,
may.
please.
It was that I had understood meditation completely wrong. I thought
Hmm.
that to get meditation right, I needed to constantly keep my mind focused on the meditation. And I would berate myself when my mind would do what the human mind will do,
Yeah.
which is meander. Okay. Someone then told me, and I don't remember who, it's unfortunate. I wish I could give them credit, that when your mind meanders and you catch yourself and you come back, it is like doing a brain curl, like being in the gym and doing a curl. It
Yeah.
is actually that, recognizing that your mind has taken you off who you want to be at the moment and coming back to that center. That skill set, that skill set is gained through losing yourself momentarily, but being able to come back to yourself very, very rapidly. And I think that's really the key.
Hmm.
The skill that allows you to stay closer to your center is the ability to first know who you are when you're at your center, and then have the peace inside your head to recognize, hey, you know what? I'm going down. I'm veering off the course I want to live on, and I want to come back. I want to come back to myself. And I've had you know what? I had an opportunity just recently that I'd love to share. It's in the workplace,
Please.
and it would probably be something that people could relate to. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm now running a consulting firm, and I have a Fortune 500 clients. I'm running a big project for this client. It's a wonderful company with wonderful people. And one of the people that are now reporting to me on this new project, it's a massive global project, it's very complex, really challenged me around the tools I wanted to use for the project. I'm not going to name names, but I had a specific software I wanted to use for a specific purpose. And frankly, I had my reasons. My reasons, I believe and still believe, are just. And frankly, the results are proving that. She struggled to accept that, and she was being passive aggressive, right? I specifically said, I don't want emails with 20 people on them. I think that's not constructive.
Yeah.
If there is a topic that requires that many people, then we need to talk about it first. We need to strip it down to its core. We need to understand who really needs to be part of that. I also don't want vendors brought into these emails, because it creates a free-for-all where everybody feels like they can come at the vendor. I want to do it a different way. Literally the very day I had this conversation early on, she challenged me on it. At the very day that I reminded her that that was my preference, she sent out an email to 20 people and copied the vendor. An older version of me would have ripped her. I don't know if I can say I don't know if I can cuss here.
Go on.
But all right, I would have ripped her a new asshole. I would have humiliated her and not recognize what a shit I am for doing that. Okay. This time, from a place that I'm proud of, I was able to not do that. I was able to send her a note, explain again, even though I'd already done it.
Yeah.
Why I was concerned about this approach. And I basically said to her at the end, I said, you know what? I can't say for sure that I'm right about this approach. It's entirely possible that I'm wrong. However, because it's a project that I'm running, I need you to play ball with me. And I'm asking you to please play ball with me. And I was so proud of myself. It was one of the last things I did that day. And I remember how I would feel after I would send one of those emails where I would rip someone up. There would be this anxiety of awaiting the response.
Yeah.
And not knowing where it's going to go. Is this going to get nastier? And then you get the response. A lot of times you don't even want to open it because you're like, this is going to be nasty. It's going to ruin my day. Moving away from that to a place where no matter the circumstances, I am going to be okay with how I'm handling myself. And that is the most important thing. You can't control what other people do. You can only control how you react to what other people do. And when you're at your best, you are able to be measured no matter the situation. And it took me, I'll be 51 this year. It took me 49 years to get there, and I'm still a work in progress. So for anyone listening who's like, oh my gosh, this seems impossible, or oh my gosh, will I ever be there? You know what? You know how you start? You literally just start. You make a commitment that today you're going to do better than yesterday, and tomorrow, when tomorrow comes, you do better than you did today. And that's all you can do. And put some practices in place, because you know what? If you want to be muscular, if you want to be fit, you can't just wish that. You have to do something about it. You have to get to the gym. You have to go on a run. You have to go on a walk. You want to get better mentally? Practice. Do meditation. Journal. I'm an avid journaler because I've come to believe that being able to get out of my mind whatever's irking me, putting it on paper, is a release. And we need that release to be able to return to our best self. Things build up, you have to unload them. If you don't, guess what happens? Something other than who you are as the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. There's something that I really appreciate about you that I don't think you appreciate in yourself. And I'm going to challenge you on this.
Okay.
What I know, and it's a tenet of my approach to business and life, is that you have to go too far to see how far you can go. And being abusive as you were was necessary to be the man you are today.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And it can be a difficult truth to accept because there's a lot of carnage, in the past. There's hurt feelings. There's people I have hurt. And yet I know that it was going too far that allowed me to be the man I am today. And I'm saying this not for you and I'm saying it for you who are listening. You just can't be that careful. You can't be that certain. And I really like how, you made a very clear declaration. Do not do these group emails and then She did it. And then you had a choice to do things as you had done to relieve that pressure inside of you, which is why people blow up, or to try it differently because you've seen the carnage. And that's what it takes. It takes a loss of business. It takes sometimes a loss of everything, going too far to come back and say, okay, now I know where the edges are. Here's where I'm going to operate.
And you are entirely right. I got in trouble for saying this on my own podcast, and a bunch of our listeners sent me a book about it after I said what I said, which was that I do not believe in regret. But
Yeah.
that's not from a place of I'm a sociopath who doesn't believe that there are things you in your past that are regrettable. It's
Yeah.
from a place of everything that brought me to where I am is a lesson.
Of course.
And of course, I can spend all this time wallowing in either beating myself up or self-pity about whatever's happened to me. And there are plenty of things I could tell your audience stories about my life that would be harrowing, honestly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter that I've accomplished what I've accomplished. There have been many,
Yeah.
many, many challenges in my personal life and professional life. The point is that they have all made me who I am today. And I do agree with you. I think I certainly wouldn't advocate being an asshole just for the sake of being an asshole, just to see how far you can push. But I would
Right,
say,
right, right.
I would say that it, unfortunately, for us humans, it's not enough to only to hear from others that there is a way that works better. We oftentimes need to experience it on our own, and it's probably best that we do experience on our own, as unfortunate as it may be, that we can't just acquire knowledge and apply it
Mm.
without experiencing something other than the best version of ourselves, or the life we want to lead prior to experiencing setbacks or instances where we acted in a way that we're not proud of. It does take, unfortunately, experience. And to anyone in the audience who is currently an asshole or a recovering asshole, and I'm using that term liberally because generally speaking, most people that would have worked for me or knew me would tell you that was an I was there for the people that worked for me and there for the people that worked with me a vast majority of the time. But when you got on the wrong side of me, and it took a
Yeah.
lot, it took a lot, it took a
Yeah.
lot. But once you did, I'd rip you to shreds. And that version of me is dead. And I
Mm.
could not be more proud than it. So, and
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't have happened if I didn't know what that version of me is like and how much I dislike that version of myself.
Yeah. There's something, look, human beings are designed by God, the universe, happenstance, whatever you want to call it. But it is true that we are designed to be in relationship with each other. At our core, we want to love and be loved more than anything. And
That's the tattoo on
right.
my arm, as you know.
Yes.
Literally, to love and be loved is the tattoo on my arm.
Yeah, it is true. And so when we act in opposition to that truth, it takes something away from us. Now, we can justify it and say, I had to do it because of X, Y, and Z, and I need this and that. But there is something core, there is something inside of us, our legitimate cricket, that says you are doing something wrong and you must stop. And it will catch up with you. It will either catch up with you in consciousness or it will catch up with you in heart attacks and cancer, but it will catch up with you.
Yeah, that is
And
true. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
yeah,
And while it's a cliche, you know why cliches are cliches? Because they're true.
because they're true. Yeah. You said something earlier that was something of a little throwaway line, but I wrote it down because it's very important. You were talking about when the business failed, and you said there were people who seemingly let me down. And the most important word is seemingly. They seemingly let me down. Now, most
Mhm.
people will say when they're recounting something awful that happened, all the people who hurt me and tricked me and let me down. Why did you say they seemingly let me down?
I'm really pleased to get this question because I think it's a really important question. I give a lot of credit to my therapist at the time because I didn't quite see it that way. I saw it the way most people see it. People let me down and I got screwed.
Yep.
And I that was the story I told myself, and that was the story I told my therapist.
Hmm.
And he listened to me very patiently, and he acknowledged that what I said could have been the truth, and that was that we could stop right there and just deal with what I just said. But he said, life's not, one dimensional. It's multidimensional. And I want you to tell me the story again, except this time you're not the victim. Tell me the story again where there's a path for you to be the hero. And tell me the story again and see the actions of other people from an assumption that they were not looking to get you, but they
Hmm.
may have had a job to do, or they may have had circumstances to deal with, right? I was really upset, without getting into names or details,
Yeah.
about how my financial backers didn't come to my aid at a time where, had they come to my aid, which wouldn't have been, seemingly, again, wouldn't have been that big of an ask, it would have saved me, them, and others a whole bunch of heartache and money. But they didn't. And they didn't for reasons that, when I put their hat on, made all the sense in the world.
Mm.
They had their commitments and their obligations and their point of view, and they were true to that. And it wasn't about getting me. So I would say, seemingly, because I've come to see that, sure, most people have self-interest at heart,
Yeah.
but in my opinion, and maybe call me an eternal optimist, I think most people are good. I think most people want to do the right thing more often than not. And sure, there are jerks in the world. I've run into
Yeah.
them. But to assume, and there's some people in my life, frankly, and I think it was a learned behavior from some people in my life when I was a child, especially, who never took responsibility for their actions. It was always someone else's fault. There was
Yeah.
always someone that screwed it other than them. And I came to appreciate that the best way forward for me was to own what I didn't do as well as I could have, to forgive people who, because they had other commitments and other obligations, needed to do things differently than I would have loved for them to have done it if they could put my self-interest above their own, right?
Right.
Which, why would they? And when I reached that conclusion, I found peace.
Mm.
It's a very expensive peace, by the way. It cost me tens of millions of dollars, but
Yeah.
I found it.
Right. It's funny when I tell my story of how lost my marketing company and lost, 100,000 something. And I'm around people who are like pocket change, and but the core of it, I think, and what we're talking about is, when you lose everything, you lose yourself. And it's a it's an important journey. It's an honorable journey to lose
I think
yourself.
when you lose everything, you finally have the opportunity to find yourself.
Yes, right. But you do get lost first. And so
For
when you're
sure.
talking about unable to get out of bed and
Mhm.
questioning everything, it's part and parcel to the journey, to how it works.
Mhm.
And that's the courageous part of being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is not hard work. Anybody can work hard. It's the it's negotiating, caring for yourself and being good to yourself when you just majorly fucked up and hurt a bunch of people. And coming
It's
coming back and
super
getting
hard.
better. Yeah.
It's super hard. I think it was my therapist again. I wish I could say his name. I think it's unethical, because
Yeah.
he really did help me a lot.
Yeah.
But I did share with him, one of the things that was really causing me a lot of agony was that there had been people that had been with me on this journey with this company for, in some cases, a decade.
Mm.
And I was really, and they had stock options, and and I was looking forward to them having a payday one day when the company
Yeah.
sold. And eventually, by the way, the company sold, but it was sold, unfortunately for me and them, after the setback had already kind of hardened into certain reality that kept us out of the equation. And I felt so bad about it. And here's what he told me. He said, the analogy I want you to take to heart is, think of yourself not as a pilot whose job is to take passengers from one destination to another destination in its entirety. Think of yourself as a bus driver And you
Mhm.
stop at certain stops along the way, and people get on and people get off. Okay. Now, people got on that bus with you, and maybe you didn't take them all the way to the last stop. Okay. But for many of these people, for a decade, working for you was a source of pride, a source of being able to take care of their families, of building a life. And sure, now they need to go in a different direction, which is just the way things often are. People move on. People do different things. Nobody expects you to be here except maybe
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And even if they do, that expectation belongs to them.
That's true.
And it's a difficult thing when you feel as if seemingly you let
Hmm.
someone down. It's like, you know, when you walk out of your house in the morning, you take a risk. And this is the game that we're playing. It is a game of risk. Risk is why we're here. And if you're unwilling to risk both yourself and other people, then you're not living. And I have a friend who's a surgeon who said, we have a saying, and that you're not a doctor until you kill a patient. And I said, what how can that be true? And he said, it's not like we kill somebody, like we like, oh, I'm gonna go in it. But we learned later, like, ooh, if I had known what I know now, that person might not have died. And and I said, how do you negotiate that? And he said, that's what it takes. We're going to save a lot more lives than we lose. And that's what it takes. And the same is very true for entrepreneurship. You're going to hurt people. You're going to disappoint people. You're going to make promises with the best of intentions and then realize that that was impossible. And people are going to be so unhappy with you. But it's what happens when you look in the mirror that determines whether you're going to end it or move forward.
And it's whether you did, in fact, have the best intentions. I think,
Yeah.
as I said, I do believe that most people are good. And generally speaking, the people I've run into, this is whether in business or in life, are honorable. I mean, they're not out there to screw anyone, and certainly not blatantly. Everyone may want a little edge, but wanting a
Mm-hmm.
little edge does not make you a crook. Okay. And I do think that, aspiring to do more for people than you end up being able to do is actually, there isn't an entrepreneur that I've met or spoken to, or certainly my own experience, that has not let people down. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Mm.
And coming to terms with that is not easy unless you are able to get to a place where you feel that you're acting from a place of dignity, respect for your values, respect for your morals. You need to be able to look in the mirror at the end of every day and say to yourself, you know what? I don't know. I may have made a sale. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I disappointed someone. Maybe I said something wrong, but I was true to my values. I was true to my morals, or at least I attempted to be as best I could be. We're human after all.
Yeah.
If you can
And you
say
know what?
that, you had
Yeah.
a good day.
And you know what? You clean it up. You clean it up to the
Mhm.
best of your abilities. You go too far to see how far you can go, and then you clean it up. Last question. What should entrepreneurs be acutely aware of nowadays?
Generative artificial intelligence is what they should be aware of. It's changing the world. I mean, we are experiencing a revolution that is making the revolution of 25 years ago with the internet
Hmm.
or telephones. In my opinion, pale in comparison. I don't think people quite appreciate. Most people still do not have a keen appreciation for just how much the world is changing, while most of us aren't paying attention. If you've not had the opportunity yet to engage with ChatGPT or Perplexity, which is an incredible new browser, which makes
Yes.
Google seem like like it is incapable of thinking, which
Hmm.
it is. You've seen nothing, and experiencing those things gives you a sense of, first, it's deeply scary because in the wrong hands and unregulated, it could well end civilization. I'm not here to declare the civilization is about to end, because I do think ultimately somehow, some way, our better angels prevail. Sometimes we have to make all the mistakes in the world for that to happen. Hopefully
Yeah.
that won't be the case with generative AI. But I do think that if you're in business and you've not yet taken the time to understand how generative AI is going to change your industry, because there
Mhm.
isn't an industry that will not be impacted by it. Listen to me say it again. I don't care what you do. There is not an industry that will not be dramatically impacted by generative AI. And you owe it to yourself. If you want to survive the next decade in business, I don't care how big of a business you are or how small. If you want to be there a decade from now, 5 years from now, you better take the time right now to understand what it can do for you and what it can do against you. Harness what it can do for you, prepare for what it can do against you, or rue the day that you didn't.
What's a good place to start?
Literally down, I mean, go to OpenAI dot, I think it's .net, OpenAI.net, or just Google Chat GPT
Yeah.
and literally type a question in, and then
Hmm.
realize a couple of really cool things, which is you can type 10 questions in and it will answer them all. You can type them all at once. I don't mean
Yeah.
sequentially. I mean, type one very long-winded question with 5 different sub-questions and it will answer them all. Attach a document, any document, and ask it to analyze it for you in 100 words or less. Ask it to write an article for you in Barack Obama's voice. Ask it to write a speech for you as if you were Donald Trump. Ask it to write a sales pitch for you. Tell them what you do for, tell them what your business is and ask them to give you 5 ideas for how to market your business better. The power is unreal, unreal. So are the risks,
Yeah.
but harnessed for the benefit of your business. I'm not here to talk about government policy. There are other circles where I'd be very honored to be able to share my thoughts when it comes to that. But in the context of the audience that's listening to this, who think that are badass entrepreneurs, who are simply trying to think about ways to grow their business, add value to their customers, maybe reach their dreams, whatever those dreams are, take the time right now, right after this podcast is over, if you haven't done it yet, to go kick the tires on this thing and understand the power.
Yeah. And the the really cool thing about what you're saying is that that's the beginning, right? You ask it those questions like how best to market my new fishing lure, right? Whatever it is that you're selling. Then you do the work, right? Then you actually follow through. And that's where it really starts happening. And that's where AI can be really your best friend in that it's going to be there with you as you do all the things, but it can't prevent you from making mistakes. And it can't prevent itself from making mistakes. And so I think really what we've been talking about, and really to circle back on it, and where we began was about mistakes, about doing the things that don't work out and what you do with that. We've we've gotten so unbelievably comfortable that we believe that comfort is our birthright, and it's not. It's not anything close to that. Discomfort is our birthright. Discomfort is where we find growth and our greatest selves.
So true. There's a talented young writer who publishes under a pseudonym. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name. Of course I would. Young Pueblo, Youngpueblo. That isn't his real name. He's an immigrant who is a poet and a thinker. And I encourage, if you have not looked at his stuff, please do. And he talks about what you just said, that, the place for growth is in discomfort. Unfortunately, when we're comfortable, we're thinking about how to make, we're thinking about joy. We're thinking about pleasure and what we could do right that minute to give ourselves a little bit more joy, a little bit more pleasure. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm all for those things. But it is when we're in discomfort that we do the thinking and reflecting
Mm.
that shapes our minds and our souls in ways that can be life altering if we follow through. And I don't think that it's false to say that most people, unfortunately, live their lives in a fog. They mean well, so I don't think this is in contrast to what I said earlier. I think most people are well-meaning, but not that well connected to themselves. Don't really truly know themselves. I'll give you a little exercise. I'd encourage you to do it right now. Put your hand on your heart for a second. Just put it on your heart. There's something unreal. If you're quiet for 5 seconds afterwards, you suddenly realize, oh my God, here I am. Here I am. There's something so powerful about that. I try to do that every day.
And finally, what's next for you? What's next for you and Ignite IT?
So, Ignite IT is a relatively new company. I've for the majority of my career, I've been an entrepreneur and CEO. I went into consulting. I was not really sure I was cut out for it. It turns out I'm pretty good at it. And so, Ignite IT is about helping, like you said, it's companies, large, small, startups, established companies. They're in different places in their journey, and they need different things. But I've had the fortune or misfortune, depending on how you want to look at it, to have experienced the entire journey from starting a company and the pains and frustrations there, and making mistakes and what happens when you do, and then dealing with investors, sometimes just angels and other time institutionals, and how that works. Working with a board, having to pivot, recognizing that your product, whatever it is failing to do what it used to do or what you wanted it to do, and
Yeah.
needing to change. All those things I've been through, and I feel very fortunate to be able to support clients in this journey through coaching or advising. But I also have a startup of my own that I'm really excited about. It is actually in the generative AI space. It's leveraging generative AI to help people buy their groceries and plan their meals in a more streamlined way, to reduce waste, to improve use of what they have at home, eat more healthy, and save money. And I'm really excited about that. I'm working with a really cool group of people on it, and we're going to be taking the product to the market sometime in the summer. In addition to that, my wonderful, brilliant girlfriend, Erin, has a very successful business and a great idea for, she's a psychotherapist and has a very unique way to help people who have suffered through trauma and PTSD get to the bottom of what's holding them back, and do it in ways that are just outside what any of us who've experienced therapy have ever experienced. In a matter of a week, you can find things about yourself and get to the bottom of things that you've been struggling with for years or decades. So I'm helping her realize her dream, which is reaching more people. Right now, she's got a solo practice here in Tampa Bay. Her dream, which I'm helping facilitate, is reaching a lot more people here in Tampa Bay, and then opening offices in other cities, and then maybe even globally someday. So those are the things that are on my mind. And in addition to that, of course, I'm a grandfather to 3 beautiful young girls. So I try to spend as much time as I can with them, and with my dog Zeke, who is the guy who got me out of bed when I could barely get out for any other reason.
Well, so many levels of badassness, Tal. I love it. I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate so much you sharing from the heart and your truth. This is the core of what makes a badass entrepreneur badass. It's not the deals that we close, it's the connections that we make and the goodness that we bring. So Tal Zlotnitsky, thank you for being on for Badass Entrepreneurs.
Coach Dan, it's been such an honor. I'm really honored to have spent time with you, both on your interview with us and here. And I look forward to, continuing to preach along with you to the people out there who recognize that exactly what you just said, which is being a very successful entrepreneur is not the opposite of being a very good human. In fact, the better a human you are, the likelier you are to be a badass entrepreneur.
Well said. Be well, my friend. Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word GAP. It's a short read, it's fun, it's easy, and if you hate reading like I do, you can grab the audiobook. It's at that same link. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.